Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. Apparently we're too grumpy, Dave, so we've got to be less grumpy, more upbeat, even though I try and be as upbeat as possible, but there's only so much I can invest in not being Scottish. But anyway, welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. We're here to talk about watches and a lot more, it turns out. If you thought the Speedy scandals of a few weeks back when it was uncovered that over $3 million worth of dodgy dealings were afoot in the watch world, that does not compare to a watch dealer YouTuber who has walked away with $5 million. So there'll be more on that later on, plus lots of new releases, but we should probably check in with Dave and make sure that he is okay. Are you sleeping well at night, Dave? Are you okay?
I'm actually being relatively upbeat. I am dismayed to find that people have said we're grumpy, but hey, I guess no one knows until they actually watch these things. But yes, I am all upbeat. Yes, someone's walked away with a lot of money. Well, someone's walked away with a lot of money and then I don't think they actually have that money anymore, which is more worrying, but we'll talk about that later.
And they've not actually walked away. They've kind of turned around and said, well, guys, you know, if you want to get your stuff back, if you want to get paid, then you're going to have to let me do some stuff. But that's a story for later on. That is unfolding, although I have been spending a lot of time catching up on the bullshit behind the scenes with that one because I was quite invested in that story a number of years ago. Things happened, I walked away from it, and it all happened just like I predicted, just like the NFTs. So we'll get to that shortly. But there's some new watches to talk about, so where will we start first?
We should talk about Grand Seiko.
Is that because that's your favourite brand? Is that your favourite brand? Right, because you've got 1,000,001 Grand Seikos, you've got 1,000,001 Omega Speedmasters and associated G-Shocks. What is your favourite brand? Tell us.
I wouldn't say Grand Seiko is my favourite brand. They're a brand that they're definitely in the top three. They're a brand that I've got a bit of an affinity with. I guess more through Seiko and because I kind of got into Grand Seiko relatively early, and that wasn't by me being some avant-garde trendy dude getting into early. It was more because actually a friend of ours, Simon Porter, who has Porters in Glasgow, was one of the very first Grand Seiko retailers, full stop, and he was, or certainly I say full stop, one of the very first Grand Seiko retailers in the UK and in Europe outside of Japan. And he did a very good job of making sure that these were tempting us with their wares. So we get into, I guess, relatively early. Even you, who are a bit newer to the watch game, I think you've been exposed to Grand Seiko from pretty much the word go as well, just because of the nature of, we've got some great retailers around us that have those brands.
You know what? Simon has a lot to answer for. And so do you, because it was through you organising Red Bar in the UK and the Scottish ones. First one I went to was obviously at Simon's place. And then I believe Rob, Handsome Rob, from Grand Seiko, he came along and did another Red Bar event where he was showcasing Credor. I thought Switzerland was the best place on the planet for watchmaking, and it turns out the Japanese are kind of creeping up, if not overtaking already. They did it in the electronics field. I remember in Back to the Future, where something breaks down on Marty's car and Doc says, there's a problem, made in Japan. Not the case any longer.
No, I think we've been really lucky because back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean maybe say 10 years ago, there really weren't that many places that you could get access to see a lot of the high-end Seiko or the Grand Seiko stuff. Because remember, back 10 years ago, it wasn't really a separate brand. It was a Seiko Grand Seiko. You still had the dual-branded dials back then as well. And you really didn't see them that commonly in the high street. So there was many cities and towns in the UK where you just wouldn't see Grand Seiko. So we were lucky that way. But as I say, I've got a lot of affinity for the brand. They're pretty cool. I do like Japanese stuff as well. And again, with technology, as you mentioned, you know, the Japanese, when I was growing up, when I was very young, Japanese stuff was still seen as, it's a bit iffy, it's Japanese, it's not British or American or European. And then they very quickly took over, you know, with Sony especially becoming one of the powerhouses of the electronics industry, whether it was, you know, Walkman or whether it was hi-fi stuff or gaming or all the other facets of stuff that they've done. And when you look back now, the Japanese are so far ahead and were so far ahead in all the technologies. Before the iPhone, you used to look at Japan with like envy with all these phones that had all these gizmos and things they did. But, you know.
New listeners, new viewers, welcome to Classic Scottish Watches, where we create a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole in a rabbit hole. Anyway, back to this Grand Seiko, Dave. Apologies.
Yes, back to the Grand Seiko. So let's bring it back to that. So what we have here is a new model called the Tokyo Lion. Now, this is a case that's very infrequently seen. It's been seen on a handful of models up to this date. Probably the most well-known of them was the Godzilla And that was this kind of faceted case that took a lot of design cues from the logo and a lot of those kind of brand aesthetics that was kind of amalgamated into this sports case, which was made in titanium. They also did, I think it was for the 20th anniversary, they did these Lions main ones. They did a time and date, and they did a chronograph version, which had these kind of browny, greeny, olivey lion mane texture dials that were done as anniversary pieces, and all of them up to this date with this case shape have been limited edition. But finally, they have released a stock core model into the range using this faceted titanium case, and it's a pretty special case. I'm not even going to begin to try and describe it because it has got so many faceted faces. It's neither round or square. It's just a very interesting kind of conceptual almost case. The only thing that really I've been reminded of it is some of the kind of Royal Oak concept watches they've done. It's got that kind of vibe about it a little bit. Lots of Zaratsu polishing, as you would expect from Grand Seiko. And this one's got a kind of opaline silvery dial on it that's very similar to those anniversary line dials in texture, but very different in colour. Personally, I think it looks great. It's a big watch. I think it's coming in at about the 44, 45 millimeter size, just shy of 15 mil thick. So it's a chunky watch, but it is a wearable watch. Having the Godzilla, it's a lightweight watch in titanium. So although it's big, it does wear actually remarkably well. Also on a titanium bracelet with a kind of micro adjust clasp on there. Certainly at the top end of Grand Seiko standard offerings, this one comes in around about the $11,000 mark. So it's punchy in terms of price point where it comes into that 5 figures. But compared to the anniversary pieces and the Godzilla piece, it's quite a lot cheaper than they were. Therefore, I guess for what you're getting, you could say there's a degree of value in it because it's not as expensive as the limited edition versions by a good couple of $1,000. So there's a marked difference in it. I just think this is a great looking watch. It's not for everyone, for sure.
It's not my favourite Grand Seiko. And in the last edition that went out, you said that the one I really liked was not your favourite Grand Seiko. So you just can't predict what I'm going to say, and I can't predict what you're going to say. I got the experience of having a week with a Grand Seiko piece, because we've seen them a million times. You've mentioned James Porter & Son. I was in there recently. I put a clip in the previous edition of the video podcast, and you could see just some of the display that they had of the Grand Seikos that they have coming in. And like I said in the last edition, that red one that got away with the striations, if that had just had that one extra part, if that had just been spring drive, that would have been bought. And this one, I like the look of it. I think it's fantastic. It is not for me personally, but I'm sure it will go down an absolute storm.
And this one's definitely for me. I love this case shape. It's very out there, a wee bit different. And that's one of the things I do like about Grand Seiko is they do tend to do case, especially case shapes. They're well known for their dials, but their case shapes are quite often a little bit funky, much more angular and, as I say, faceted than anything really else out there. There's not much out there that does that kind of aesthetic. In terms also of this one, it is a spring drive, which is absolutely amazing movement technology. Some folk are a little bit snobbish about it, let's be fair, because they don't think it's truly mechanical, but this is a mechanical movement, albeit it has got a very small IC circuit in it, and it's got a little quartz crystal, which is what's used to regulate the timekeeping, but there's no batteries. It's a mainspring, as you would find in any mechanical watch, and as that unwinds, that's what runs the watch. So like any mechanical watch, if you don't wear it, or if it's sitting for long enough and it stops running, and you need to wind it up to get it going again. Spring drive's exactly the same. Some people just don't like the idea that there is a electronic component in there, albeit a small one. The big advantage of that, though, is if you want very, very accurate, in terms of arguably the most accurate mechanically based watch that you can buy, spring drive is it, where you have an accuracy on this model with this movement of 1 second deviation a day and a maximum of 15-second deviation a month. Now that blows COSC standard and META standard completely out of the water. This is a whole different kind of level of accuracy.
I've got an idea for you, Dave, and I think we should sell it to Grand Seiko, so we'll patent it before this episode goes out. You ready for this?
Okay.
This is it.
Ready.
This is how we win the game. We get the spring drive mechanism, and instead of using a quartz crystal, it will use a radio-controlled frequency, a bit like some of those Casios with a wave scepter, so that every day it automatically realigns itself with the atomic clocks across the world, so it won't be a deviation of 1 second a day, 15 seconds a month. It will be bang on every day. How's that sound?
That sounds remarkably like a model they make called the Astron within the Seiko range, which talks to the satellites.
Is it spring drive?
Do they do a spring drive version of it? That's a very good question.
I don't think they do.
They've done some weird and wonderful spring drives over the time, it has to be said, most of which never see the light of day outside of Japan. The Astrons, I think most of them are battery powered, to be honest.
Am I on a winner?
Maybe, but I would be pretty amazed if Seiko Grand Seiko hadn't messed around with this idea at some point.
But anyway, we have another listener email come in. We've had a ton. We've had some really good comments. People have been really appreciating the fact, Dave, that you have taken your digit out of your arse and got your little studio set up. And sometimes it looks like you've got a plane above your head floating, you know, almost like one of those caps that's got the spinning propeller on it. We do have an email from a listener, so do you want to hit us with it?
Indeed, we have an email come in from Brad. Brad says, "Friends, I enjoyed Ricky's discussion about his OF Daytona."
My OnlyFans Daytona. That's not how I managed to cover the cost of that one.
Wear a balaclava.
I was a masseuse over in Dallas Tech. No, that's another guy. We're talking about him later on.
I think he's meaning Oyster Flex, but we'll go with OnlyFans. My Pink Panda, the Everrose variant Ricky referred to, is celebrating its 4th birthday with me this week. I too was ambivalent about mine at first, for the first 1-2 years, but no more. They will pry my Daytona from my cold, dead hands. By the way, I don't care for the Sundust dial. The pink sunburst with the black indices and chronograph second hands is the right one to have, sportier with a bolder presence. Cheers, Brad. So there's Brad, who is definitely a fan of the Daytona. And a bit like you, Ricky, probably wasn't initially madly in love with it, but it's definitely grown on him.
Yeah, that's kind of the point I had on the show, that I never thought I would fall in love with it because it wasn't my first choice, but it just so happened to turn out to be the best choice, and it is subtle. And I know you've commented that I've worn it in places that perhaps you wouldn't have expected, or perhaps I shouldn't have. ADs in Geneva have also said the same thing. "Oh, sir, why are you wearing that? Cover that up." Well, bloody hell, you know, it's Geneva. It is total stealth. And I love that fact. And I've seen white dialed ones, which is obviously the one everybody kind of wants to go and get, they gravitate towards the unobtainium version. But having now seen and now owned this one, which is slightly larger in size as well, more heft, and on the Oyster Flex, although I have changed the Oyster Flex bracelet for something else, absolutely love it. I don't see it leaving the collection anytime soon, along with the Snoopy. The only thing is, I've not worn my Batman since I got the Daytona. And that is a worry, because that's the watch I originally said I would never get rid of, because it got me into the hobby and got me into doing the podcast. But anyway, enough of that stuff. We should probably do the wrist check, and people can see pretty much what I'm wearing just now if they're watching the video. But Dave, you should probably go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I am wearing a little find of the bottom of the watch box as I have been preparing the space that I'm using to record now. I've been finding things that were long lost to the under-desk environment, and what I am wearing is a little Tissot, and it's this one here, and this is called the Tissot Banana. And as you can see, it's a pretty curved case.
That looks like a Frank Muller.
It's got that vibe about it for sure, because the big numerals have got that kind of feel. Now, this is a Tissot that was done as I think it was a celebration. It was around about 2017, and it was a celebration of the original, what they call banana watch, which was originally in a gold case, with a black dial, kind of gilded black dial. And the story goes allegedly that one of the Russian clients had it, and then had been sent to Switzerland. Then the Russian Revolution happened, and a whole load of stuff went on, and the watch couldn't be sent back because there was a ban on the exportation or importation of gold to Russia post-revolution, yada, yada, yada. So this remained in Tissot's collection, and they did this kind of anniversary piece. Now, this is not nearly as fancy. This is not gold. This is a stainless steel case with a rose gold PVD coating and a black dial, and it's a quartz watch. If I remember rightly, I saw this in the Tissot boutique in London, which is sadly no longer there. It used to be just on Oxford Street, round the corner from where the current Oris boutique is. used to be on that corner store, which was a really cool looking store, kind of a big rounded end to the building. It wasn't that traditional corner building. It was just a big, nice curved building, big windows. And I saw this sitting there and I thought, that's just a good looking watch. And from memory, it was around about the £400 mark, so not expensive by any stretch of the imagination. And I thought, I'm going to go in and I'm going to try that on, because it was so far removed from anything that I guess had at that point in time. And I just went in and I tried it on and I thought, that's a cracking little watch. And actually, I've dug it out and I'm wearing it because I forgot how good it actually is. Pretty dressy, probably not my normal wear and tear, but I think when I put this on, I'm going to just fasten it up just now, and I will fix the strap. It is a pretty good fit on the wrist as well. Not a watch that overhangs. It's quite long in terms of this size here, relatively narrow, so it's definitely a long rectangle, but it wears extremely well on the wrist. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing.
Well, I'm not wearing anything quite as elegant or fancy as what you have, Dave. I have got a cheap little quartz number. Well, it's not that cheap, as you know. It's around about €250, $250. This is the Omega Moon Swatch. And I got this one earlier this year when I was over in Geneva at Watches and Wonders with you. It's wearing some new clothes. We'll get to that in a second. I wasn't bought into the hype. I didn't care. I remember last year, me and you decided we were actually going to take a trip through to Edinburgh to Swatch Boutique because we thought there'd be a queue of 10 people outside and we would go in there and we'd pick up a little quartz number. But no, there was thousands of folks lined up. You know the story if you're into your watches, or you've been into watches for the last year and a bit. But I got this one here just to kind of commemorate going across to Geneva. I got one for me, one for the girlfriend. She got the pink, I got the blue, but it comes in an atrocious strap, this kind of plastic velcro thing. So I jumped on eBay and picked up this colour coordinated number for about 10 quid. And I know it doesn't look exactly coordinated on the screen here, but it actually is quite decent. And it's very comfortable, completely changes up the look of the watch. I was impressed by it, she was impressed by it, so I jumped onto eBay and I actually got another one for her as well.
This is the second time you've managed to have a watch on a honky, dodgy, third-party, cheap strap that actually has genuinely improved the look of the watch. This looks good, and the strap you had on, I think it was your Black Bay Fast Rider or Fast Rider ceramic Black Bay. Not sure if it's a Black Bay, but it was a Tudor anyway. Your black ceramic one had that kind of rally style strap, which looked excellent as well. So you're kind of bringing me round, which I'm not entirely happy about.
Close, but no cigar. It is the Black Shield, not the Black Bay. But yes, that is on a really hokey 10 quid strap from eBay as well. I'm just really good at it. One of these days you're going to admit the Apollo 8 looks better on what I have put it on rather than what it came on.
To be honest, for me, it's the fact that it's a square end. I don't like bracelets that aren't case fitted, unless it's maybe occasionally you'll get away with it with a kind of Milanese shark meshy divery type strap. But even then, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I do much prefer a watch where the end links match into the case shape. So if somebody ever did ceramic end links that fitted into it, it would look significantly better. I just don't think it looks great with that gap on it. But the rest of it looks actually okay. It matches the case, it has to be said.
We're getting there with Dave, we're getting there. And I will admit, slightly yes, but also the fact that it's black with the black case, and it's quite a big case, the shadows that it casts, unless light's coming in from the top, you don't really notice the gaps. And in the pictures and in the video clips, you don't really see it. And I don't notice it when I'm wearing it. So that would bother the hell out of me. So yes, you're right, but you're also not right.
You sound like some kind of dodgy used car salesman there. Don't worry, sir. That big gap between the panels, it's not a problem.
Are we talking about all Teslas?
Teslas come like that for free. They come brand new like that, but that's a whole different game.
Indeed. And from one battery-powered wonder to another battery-powered wonder. The folks at Casio have been doing some great things. I'm going to do my best not to comment on the name and the word that is in the name, and we're going to get Dave to talk about a new Oceanus watch.
Yes, so the Oceanus, not as Ricky would like to pronounce it, the Oceanus, but this is a watch that proves a point for me, which is that Casio, other than a couple of their watches like the F91 or whatever it is, just sit out of view because they're kind of drowned out by the G-Shock noise that Casio's big brothers, their more rugged watches, kind of cast this shadow that really means that most Casios just sit out of the limelight. But they do a couple of absolutely cracking watches in their range. And the Oceanus is one of those watches that has quietly sat there just doing its thing. And again, it's not an inexpensive watch. A lot of people, I think, would regard Casio as your typical 20, 30, 40, maybe £50 watch, or your little fun one like your old calculator watch or your TV remote control watch that you would get as a kid. But these are titanium cased, titanium bracelet watches with some really nice features on them. The kind of features that you would typically find on your higher end G-Shocks, or moving into your kind of G-Shock MRG type watches. Now, they've done a limited edition one here, along with 3 siblings which are not limited edition. And I think what they've done with this limited edition watch is really cool. It has a sapphire bezel that has been shaped and formed in order to give you this kind of idea of the peaks and troughs of waves, and it's in a kind of hue of multiple blues, and I think this watch looks fantastic.
Dave, why do you think I put it in the list of watches to talk about? This has been circling the oceans for the last couple of weeks, and I've tried to get it into the show and failed successfully multiple times, but here we are. And I think this is incredible looking, and I agree with everything you've said up till this point, so keep going. Let's see if you can go a full show with me agreeing with everything you say.
No, absolutely. Nice titanium case, not just your kind of commoner garden finish as well, a kind of really nice, and Casio are known for this kind of sandblasted textured finish on it as well, slightly darkened rather than that brighter titanium finish, which I think really allows that blue, which is quite bright blues. In fact, the background blues and purples that you've got in your background, in fact, remind me of the bezel of this watch. It's got a similar kind of colour palette to it as well. It just looks fantastic. You've got the solar power in there as well, and that solar cell is underneath the dial in the bezel, but it still lets the light through to be able to efficiently charge it. This is just a great looking watch. Price point wise on this limited edition, which I believe there's only 300 pieces, so it's fair to say it's a fairly limited edition number. This is not your hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands that you would typically see from Casio or many other brands. 300 is a pretty tight little number, but it's coming in and around about the $2,400 mark, so definitely not the inexpensive end of Casio. That said, if many other brands had a titanium case, titanium bracelet, and this kind of fancy sapphire bezel on there, you could bet your bottom dollar it'll be a lot more than $2,500.
We tend to leave Casio to the experts, and by experts I mean Jody at Just One More Watch. But this is a little bit out of his price range. He usually deals with the dollar dazzlers, the sort of low end stuff, and occasionally into limited edition G-Shocks. You've got your wrist check last show was one of the G-Shocks. Somebody backed you up again in the comments and said they liked your Big Mac watch, which I don't agree with. We're going to have to start banning people on YouTube. But I love this. It looks incredible. Blue is my colour scheme, as you can see behind me, as you can see on the wrist and most of my favourite watches. I would buy this, although it does have a little bit of a reminiscent vibe of some of the Tissot watches that are in collaboration with MotoGP, because if you look, I'm going to ruin it for you, look at the bezel and try and not think of a motorcycle brake disc.
It does have, I guess, a little bit of a vibe of that for sure. The other thing that has to be said is we should talk about it because one of its siblings, the 3 non-limited edition versions, they don't have this fancy bezel. Fundamentally the same watch, but with just a more regular bezel on it as opposed to this fancy cut sapphire bezel. They come in at a much more accessible $1,200, $1,300 US, so they're about half the price, 60, 55, 60% of the price. So much more accessible for fundamentally the same watch and same technology. Feature-wise, everything you would basically expect from high-end Casio, high-end G-Shock, tough solar, tough movement, multi-band 6, Bluetooth connectivity. There's an app that you can connect to it to do all sorts of things. So it's got all the whiz-bang gizmos you would expect from a digital module at the higher end from Casio stroke G-Shock.
Okay, here we go. Here is the main event. Here's the watch that I actually bought with my own money that I wanted. It wasn't just a curiosity. And we spoke about it in the show, and I was that impressed by it that I decided to go ahead and get it. So without further ado, here we go. And genuinely, I have not had this watch on the wrist. Well, we've already given the game away straight away, because you can see, if you're looking at the video, it says Raymond Weil on the box. And yeah, this is a watch that I saw a few weeks ago when I was in Silverburn in Glasgow. and it was in the window, and I knew it was limited edition because we'd mentioned it on the show, and I really liked it. I've never been taken with this brand or watches before, but I saw this and thought, you know what, I like that. And I went inside, asked the sales dude to take it out the window, let me have a look at it. He did. I then did not buy it there and then. But I was back last week, and I saw it in the window again, and I decided to go in and have a look. And I thought, if it hits me the same way, I will buy it. But I walked in, and nobody actually approached me to sell me the watch. Nobody approached me to sell me bugger all. There you go, you can actually tell it's still got all the wrappings and stuff on it. So I went back a third time because I bumped into one of my friends that was actually working in the shopping centre. Spoke to him for a little bit of time, came back, went across, and the third time lucky, I went in and I bought it. And I've actually waited until now to pop it out of the box to actually take all the stuff off. So this is a genuine, official, first unboxing of the watch.
It is every bit as good as the pictures were portraying it to be. And we did talk about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago now. And it's a limited edition, I believe. It's 1,000 pieces, I think this is. 999, 1,000 pieces.
400.
Was it only 400? So it's only 400 pieces. My memory serves me badly, as usual. Proving a point that certain brands were all a little bit dismissive of it. The more you get into the hobby, I guess, there's certain brands that there's just an innate snobbery that sits around certain brands where you go, well, you know, would I really spend money on it? This, though, is a absolutely fantastic value watch. And it's a great looking watch, as to be said. That is so good.
Yeah, I think this is my biggest watch purchase of the year. It's titanium on a titanium bracelet. It's a Raymond Weil Freelancer, the music edition that we couldn't actually figure out why it was called music. Looking at it in real life here, the striations just outside the rehaut, as you've got the index markers, it looks like a vinyl record. So I think we're going to go with that one. So I'm going to have a lot of fun disassembling this, taking out the spare links and getting it on wrist. And I'll obviously do some proper pictures, drop them on Instagram. But yeah, I have been waiting patiently to do a proper, genuine unboxing on the show. And this is limited edition number 321, the Dusty Bin edition, out of 400.
What I would say to you as well is, and I hate myself for saying this, that watch is calling out for a rubber turquoise strap that you can find from your favourite emporiums of cheap straps, because I think that, or a rubber strap that matches into either the darker colour or the turquoise on there, will look amazing as a summer watch. It'll look nice and vibrant and bright and summery, and it looks quite sporty on the bracelet, but I think it could look amazing on a rubber strap.
It has been the week of scandals. And for anyone that's new to the hobby, or anyone that doesn't participate in YouTubing or YouTube drama when it comes to watches, maybe you've never heard of Paul Pluta, Archie Luxury, maybe you've never heard of Paul Thorpe or O'Sheen, or all these types of guys, you've never heard of the Timepiece Gentleman. But back 2 years ago, on the podcast here, I did mention TPG, as he's known, not TGV, but TPG, because I spotted a video when I was perusing around YouTube looking for new watch content. And he put a great video out, and I'll stand up and say it was a good video. He went out in the public, and he had a selection of watches with him, and he would approach just generic members of the public, average Joes walking around, and he would say, how much do you think this watch would cost? How much do you think that watch would cost? And he didn't do it in a way to gotcha people, and he didn't do it in a way that he was being sexist. He wasn't approaching people, young women, to show off or to do anything like that. It was done very tastefully. And I liked it. So I commented about it in the podcast, we put links in the show notes, and then we started to follow what he'd been doing. He was a dealer, he had a little bit of a past, but we didn't know much about it. More came to light shortly, but he built his business up. He started doing weekly vlogs in a sort of reality TV style, which I actually liked, and again mentioned on the show. It was quite invigorating to see the art of the deal, and it was a behind the scenes look of how somebody gets a watch, how they get it authenticated, they get it brought up to speed, they get it polished or whatever, and then they advertise it and they sell it. And the way that things go, it was very enlightening for somebody like me who's just a keen enthusiast. I've never been involved in the industry. But things took a bit of a turn because it seems things got to his head, Anthony's head, and within a few months he was living the lifestyle. He'd an R8 at the time, and suddenly it was Lamborghinis, it was private jets, it was $50,000 dinners, and I thought, this is a bit strange. Then he went dark. he had what he called his blackout week, where everything just disappeared. The social media would get turned off, and he came back a week later after everybody had said he'd done a scarper. He'd taken people's watches in consignment and just disappeared owing money. He hadn't done that. Don't know what he was up to. He never fully explained what went on, but he said he was just doing a social experiment, and everybody should have had faith in him because he wasn't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes and you don't know me, etc., etc. I took him to task on that one. I actually asked him to come on the show. He never did. But I took him to task on that because he peeled the signs off his office in his retail frontage. And if you do that and somebody comes down and they find that all your stuff's away and your sign's been scraped off the door, that's more than just have faith in me. That was a bad act of faith. But he came back and he said, oh, what we're really doing was we were away doing charity work and this, that and the other. And it turned out the charity stuff had been done after he'd been called out. So I just lost interest, that was that. Round about that time, Dave, did you know much about him? Had you been keeping an eye on things, or were you just following along from the information that I was putting on the show?
I followed the narrative a little bit rather than the actual content of their channels. But yes, I remember all the drama that went on. He's run away, he's disappeared, he's taken people's watches that were on consignment and he's done a bunk, yada, yada, yada. And then there was a lot of tales coming out about maybe the guy had a few demons, maybe he had some issues with alcohol, maybe he had some issues with life, money, habits. He'd maybe get into trouble with the law as a youngster, etc., etc. So all of these things started coming out. And of course, it then became a bit of a pile-on where lots of people would jump on. And there were others, to be fair to them, who tried to give him the benefit of the doubt and tried to side with him and say, well, look, give the guy a second chance. Some of them might, at this point, probably be regretting that decision, but
they have.
Let's carry on with the tale.
So when he came back from that, and I'm going to be quite brief because we don't want to dwell on it too much, we want to get through the information, but it is a current hot topic within the watch scene, the watch industry. He came back, and some people, like Dave said, had been backing him up. A lot of people went to bat for him when they didn't know him from Adam. And we had a problem within horology a few years back, funnily enough, with a guy who ran a YouTube channel called Horology House, a guy called Chris. He didn't do the same thing, but the way he got on the bad side of the watch public, the watch community, was he was advertising watches through buy-sell groups, and because he'd created celebrity through a year's worth of fantastically shot watch videos, people trusted him. And I was always of the opinion, you can't trust anybody unless you know them. The term long con means long con. And he walked away probably making $500,000, something like that. And people were still backing him up going, but his YouTube videos were great. Well, yeah, con man's story for a year. If you're going to make $500,000 in a year by conning people and making good videos, yeah, great. Think about it logically, guys. But anyway, the Timepiece Gentleman, I took less of an interest, wasn't caring. No, there was nothing of merit for me to focus on until in the last week, everything went crazy. Because a video popped out from Anthony saying that he is $5 million in debt and he's going to do his best to make it back. And what seems to have happened is that life has caught up with him. The private jets, the Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, the dinners at Salt Bay, all the rest of it. He was spending $400,000 a month. That was rentals, that was food, that was clothing, and then the stuff that has come out that he has admitted himself, that a lot of it went on cocaine, hookers, and gambling. And this is the stuff that he has admitted. Now, in the past, he has been inside. He's a felon, convicted felon. He's had recently, I think it was 4 DUIs, a whole load of different things like that, which, gives people the second chance, all the rest of it. If they come through the system and repent, they serve their time. Yeah, that's cool. But a big saying within the industry that everybody has probably heard at least once is, buy the seller. Don't buy the watch, buy the seller. And red flags are all over the place with this guy. I would never have bought a watch if it was a convicted felon that had done whatever it was in the past. I would not buy. Personally, I would not buy from that person, just as if somebody was a convicted thief. I wouldn't leave them in my house. I wouldn't invite them into my house. If someone was a convicted XYZ, I wouldn't let them look after my children. I wouldn't let them do this, that, or that. There's certain things that you wouldn't do. And watches is a high monetary value game. So that's where I kind of drew the line with it personally. And I wasn't interested in sort of looking into anything more until this happened. And everybody's been talking about it. I had Jonathan from Watch Company call me a few days ago. I had Paul Thorpe call me while I was in the bath tonight to talk about this and other things. It is a huge topic, and the big catch, the big gotcha at the end of it all is he is now saying, listen guys, see the guys that I have defrauded for this $5 million. The only way I can make this right is if you let me carry on selling watches. Then I can make the money back to pay these guys off. So this is a guy that has admitted what he's done, and he's now asking everybody to just give him one more chance so he can make back the money. It is just mind-boggling. And some people are buying into it. Some people are saying, yeah, give him another chance. How many chances do you need to give somebody? If this was anybody else, and if this was a car dealer that ran away with people's cars, because what has happened is he's lied and said that, first of all, watches were stolen. £2 million worth of watches were stolen, and then admitted that was a lie, and he just spent all the money. People have consigned watches to him, which, if you don't know, is where you give your possession to somebody, they sell it on your behalf. When they sell it, they take a fee, and they give you the rest of the money back. Now, he was taking watches, selling them, keeping the money, and not giving anybody any money. And then customers were checking his website and seeing that their watch was no longer for sale, and calling up and saying, where's my watch? Oh, it hasn't sold yet, but it's not on the website. Oh, that's just a glitch. Tons and tons of things like that. So, yeah, I think anybody that entertains this guy going forward or in the past, it's on your head, be it. It certainly would not be me.
No, 100%. I think, like you mentioned, people to a degree deserve second chance, benefit the doubt to a certain extent, but there are so many red flags with this particular individual that going anywhere near him in terms of trusting him with either your high value possessions or money or something worth money is just a fool's errand. And I'm not in agreement with blaming victims, but at this point, any of you who know this story and want to support him, be it at your own risk and at your own behest, because the guy has form and the guy has shown no contrition, no remorse, really. It's a case of, oh, woe betide me, look at poor me, I owe $5 million. What are you going to do to help me to owe these people back the $5 million? No, a leopard doesn't change his spots. But sadly, that has come at the expense and the cost to lots of average people in the world who can't afford to lose that money. They were usually selling a watch as a broad idea because they wanted some money back to either do something with their life, their family, or buy other watches, whatever it was. But people were selling these in order to get the money back, and that money's disappeared.
You raise a good point. I endured a 6-hour live cast with Tim Wright, O'Sheen, and various other players where the Timepiece Gentleman came on to speak about things, and I listened to it in its entirety, maybe at 2 times speed, but I still listened. And to hear the bravado and the narcissism seeping out when he was trying to control it, and his first video was very heartfelt and somber. It was like, oh, right, okay, I've realised there's a problem. Well, yeah, $5 million in debt is a problem, and if you didn't see that coming, you're not a really good businessman. And the way he was acting on this live stream, at certain points where O'Sheen was giving him it tight, real tight, and I'll put the link in the show notes with a couple of points where to go if you want to check out what was said, he had no answer. And at certain points he was saying, yeah, people that go to college and university, they end up working for people like me. And it's like, yeah, you're not a great businessman, you're $5 million in debt. You've screwed this right up. And there was lots of things like, well, I'm a really good salesman, I'm really good at selling watches. Well, obviously you're not very, because look at where you are. So O'Sheen had some amazingly good points. And I don't watch O'Sheen. I've never watched his stuff in any great length. He's just one of the YouTube guys that I don't have the time to watch and don't have the time to listen to. But he made some very fair points. And I know he's been involved in drama in the past, blah, blah, blah. It might be pot calling the kettle black. But there was a lot in there. And there was a lot to unpack. And yeah, the whole point at the end, as they deconstructed things, the guys that were on the live chat, was the way Anthony is now saying it is, listen, if the victims want to get paid, the only way they're going to get paid is if you let me sell watches and you buy watches from me and I make a profit and I pay them back. And it's like a digital thing. It's like a binary decision. It's either yes or no. It's not a case of he could go and get a job doing something else and pay back. It's no. He needs to sell watches. You have to trust that he is going to do the right thing. And I think that is absolute lunacy. So I'm keen to see how this develops. There's obviously going to be a lot of repercussions legally. I believe people are taking them to court. You mentioned there about people losing their money. There was a gentleman who wrote in and said he had sold a Submariner, and the money that from that was like part of his life savings that he was going to use for his family, and now that has disappeared. There's a whole load of bad stories in there. Some people will be just adding fuel to the fire, Reddit groups and things like that. But when he comes out and he admits what he's done wrong, and then turns around and says, but guys, I'm all right now. Trust me, give me your watches. I'll sell them. Who's he kidding?
Well, he will sell them. Whether you see the money is an entirely different proposition. So if you feel that you want your watch to be sold, I would go with a different channel or a different option, because there are many completely legitimate channels out there. This is not the one to choose, would be my advice.
If it seems too good to be true, or there are any red flags at all, for instance, the convicted felon that has been in and out of jail, I think he said he was arrested 40 times in total in one of his videos. Why? Why would you do it? Just don't. Just go with somebody that is legit. And you're right, a lot of people have had a lot of egg on their faces. Roman Sharf had to put a video out saying, oh, I defended Anthony the last time that he did something stupid. Turns out that was misplaced. Other people, Paul Thorpe put a video out. But we're going to end with a good watch story. We're going to talk about JLC, a brand that I really like. I visited their manufacturer. We're actually going to be doing another factory tour. We'd found out today, but we're going to keep that in the bag. We're going to tease that out over the coming months, because that's going to be a good end to the year. But back to JLC, Dave. They've got a cool watch out. Tell us all about it.
It's a new iteration of an existing model, and this is the JLC Master Control Chronograph Calendar. What they've done here is they've taken a model that is quite an understated, quite classy looking model, and they have pimped it up a little bit. The existing model has a much more conservative opaline silver kind of dial on it. This time though, they've introduced a black dial with red highlights. And personally, I love it and hate it simultaneously. It's a watch that looks fantastic. This colour palette, I think, definitely works. The legibility, not quite so much. I think that tonally it's all quite dark, and I think under certain lights this will be quite a difficult watch to actually be able to tell the time and use the functions of. But as a thing, in daylight, it looks glorious. Now, it's just a great watch. It has all the kind of features you would expect from something from JLC that's not a reverso. You know, that classic piece that everyone instantly associates with JLC, the reverso. This is a much more kind of classy, contemporary round model, as opposed to that much more classy square polo watch that everybody knows about. The chrono on it is a pulsometer, a little bit different, something slightly more unusual, not your tacky that you would normally find in most chronographs out there. You've got moon phase, you've got all your calendar functions that you would expect to see on there. But as I say, I'm going to have big doubts about its legibility in slightly light-deprived environments.
As much as I'm playing with my new watch, I'm still listening to what Dave's saying there. And I'd have to call you to task, like I'm calling loads of people to task in this show, and say, the legibility looks okay to me. I really like the look of the watch. The fact that it's black and gold, and those hands are going to just stand proud of the dial. They're going to capture any light in the room. I always thought with my Black Shield ceramic Fast Rider that I wouldn't be able to tell the time on it because it had polished hands, and they weren't gold, they were silver coloured. And no, because of the contrast, the light just manages to get in there somehow, and it reflects back into my eyes. And this one, I just love the look of it. I think it's fantastic. It's got a roulette wheel style to it. It's very classic looking. It reminds me of some of the Pateks perhaps. And I think the legibility will be absolutely fine. Perhaps my eyes are slightly better than yours because I had laser surgery.
This case looks absolutely quintessentially JLC, coming in at 40mm, round about 12.5mm thick, so a really nice kind of balance in terms of size, thickness and diameter. So it will be a lovely presence on the wrist without being overly large and cumbersome. So a nice kind of sports dress watch, I'd maybe define this as. That in-house movement being the 759 caliber, everything you would expect from JLC. It is an industrial finish on it, but a very nice industrial finish, it has to be said. Coming in at round about $32,000 US, so certainly in the punchier end of watch pricing, but it is a gold case, therefore you're going to expect it to immediately be up into that kind of nearer 30,000 mark anyway. going by its kind of brethren and competitors with that style and material for the case. 65 hours of power reserve on there as well. You get an alligator strap with a deployant or deployment, however you want to call it, clasp. Funnily enough, no one's written this in to complain about me saying deployment.
No, they did.
I think you're right though, Ricky. It is a very classy looking watch. I think that black and red does have that reminiscence of maybe something Patek, something slightly darker, dressier, classy. It's a great looking combination. It remains to be seen, my point about legibility. But yeah, lovely watch.
Right, GLC, quickly, love it. The price is okay. I'm quite happy with that. Daytona pricing, GLC pricing, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Great movement. In-house caliber, the watchmaker's watchmaker, da-da-da. Now, here's something I was thinking of. Literally, as I was walking to my car the other day, and I was thinking about a watch that's not been on video yet, but we have talked about in the show, and that is the Sega Designs X Series, which is around about £300. Skeletonized, automatic movement, it's IP coated, it's got all kinds of funky stuff in it, and as I say, 300 quid, there or thereabouts, versus perhaps like my Snoopy, which is around about 10 grand. And I was thinking, do I get 30 times the amount of enjoyment out of the Snoopy versus the Sega Design?
That is a classic question and conundrum that many people, I think, conveniently don't think too much about. But it's a very valid one, because the same can be said of Swatches or G-Shocks or Sega Designs or Seiko 5s or any of these kind of watches, in the same way as this watch that you have there is a fraction of the price, probably about a tenth of the price of your Daytona. Is your Daytona 30 times better than that? I'm going to go on the basis by how much you're enjoying that at the moment. Probably not.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. But we are at the end of a show, so it just remains to say, could you do all that YouTube stuff for us? Can you do the like, the comment, the subscribe, the share with your friends? We're hoping to try and get a few more followers, a few more viewers involved in things. We're having fun on YouTube. It's all good stuff. Dave's even playing the game. He's got lights. He's got his mic in the right place. Accidentally, his audio is sounding better because he has changed where he's been sitting. I've been trying to drag him into the modern ages of audio technology for about 2 years now, and by fluke, we've just managed to do it. So the video stuff is actually helping the audio guys, and we love our audio guys as well. Follow us on Instagram at Scottish Watches. Get in touch with us. All feedback is good feedback as far as we're concerned. Drop us an email, info@scottishwatches.co.uk. Do not DM us. And the last thing to say is our watch auction. That is the thing we're probably going to chat about next, because it's happening in about a week's time, and we want everybody to get involved because we have got some amazing things in there. But more on that shortly. You'll see it on our Instagram, you'll see it on our website, you'll hear it in the show, and you'll see it on YouTube. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys again soon.